Hello, friends. Welcome to Feeling This Life. We're a family support podcast that dives deep into the triumphs, challenges, and strategies that are part of the lives of those who care for children with blindness and visual impairments. I'm Paige Maynard, and I'm a teacher of the visually impaired and an early interventionist at VIPS, Visually Impaired Preschool Services.
And I'm Dr. Cathy Smith, and I also have been a teacher of students with visual impairment for many years. And now I am the Director of Research at Anchor Center for Blind Children.
I am jcastenir, and I am the Family Services Coordinator at VIPS. I am the mother of 3 girls, and my youngest has a visual impairment.
So welcome. So today, very exciting. I get to interview my friend Nana Phangia Dewald, who is an orientation mobility instructor, and I have known her for over 10 years, and she has been instrumental in teaching me more about orientation and mobility in early intervention. So I will admit, before we even listen to her to the interview, that I was one of those TVIs who did not think children needed to have orientation and mobility until they were old enough to walk. And in the 10 years that I've known Nana, she has taught me differently. So I am a convert, and I hope you enjoy the interview, and we'll talk about it after. Welcome, Dr. Phangia Dewald, or Nana. I know that you are an advocate for orientation and mobility for very young children with visual impairment. In early intervention, orientation and mobility services are sometimes still a controversial subject. I hope you can give the parents and practitioners listening today some understanding of your stance on this issue. So first, can you give us a brief explanation of what orientation and mobility, or O&M, means for families who have not encountered this term yet?
Well, first I want to say thank you for inviting me to come and have a conversation with you. And as you said in your introduction, I am an orientation or O&M specialist, orientation and mobility or O&M specialist. And for those of you who have not heard of the term orientation and mobility is a set of skills that individuals who are blind or visually impaired learn and use to move around and travel in various familiar and unfamiliar environments on their own as much as possible. So we're talking about independence here. So I think the typical thing that you may think about when it comes to O&M is teaching skills with the white cane. So if you see people walking out there with the white cane, so the white cane with the red tip, that's what I teach. So it's orientation and mobility, but not all of my students use a cane, but we'll get back in a little bit.
Great.
And so orientation first is knowing where you are in space, and mobility is being able to move from one point to another. So if you put them together, before you are able to move and move around, you need to know where you are in space so you can get where you need to go. And so for young children, O&M concepts and skills can include learning about their bodies and where their body parts are, using positional and directional concepts so that they can move to certain areas with following directions if they don't have a lot of vision or low vision. And then also being able to explore and move about in their home environments at that young of age. And so O&M is really about learning to move around in space on your own with impaired vision.
Perfect. Sounds great. Okay. So why do you believe that very young children with visual impairment need to have O&M services, and what can happen if they do not?
I am a very big proponent of early intervention, especially in our field of orientation mobility. It has not always been that case. Orientation mobility started off for adults, mainly for World War II veterans who came back from the war blinded, and for O&M for young children, especially this birth to 3 group, hasn't really been a big focus until the last, say, about 6 to 10 years. And so I feel like, O&M is really important for young children with visual impairment because it helps them build the confidence to reach out and explore their environment and then eventually move out into their environment, first with assistance with a parent or caregiver, family member, whoever is really close to them, and then eventually on their own. That's why I think it's really important for young children to have O&M when they're young, because if you have impaired vision, so no vision or really severely impaired vision, moving out in the world can be very scary, right? So if you hear a noise in the distance and you don't know what it is, you're like, I don't know if I want to go out there and explore it. Right?
I'm going to sit right here.
Right? It's scary out there. I don't know what that noise is. It's really abrupt. But, having some of those O&M skills at a young age can help bridge that and help kids feel secure to reach out and explore things that may be kind of scary out there in their environment. And so I think that is one of the main important things, right? And so if they don't have O&M, it could carry on that nervousness or fear that they may have about reaching out and exploring their world, can really limit their opportunities in the future to be able to go out and do that on their own. And so in turn, as kids get older, that could really impact, how they feel about moving out in the world on their own. Also, it could also impact, my passion is some of their gross motor development. And so children are hesitant to move and they don't start, doing some of those independent movements like reaching out, rolling, crawling eventually, and walking. That can really inhibit how they are able to move on their own.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with you in the past about how if young babies who were just starting to learn how to cruise, how their movements with their legs would not be, with their knees, would not be as fluid as a child who does have vision.
Right.
Is that right?
And that's one of the important things that I'm glad that you brought that up, because because our students who have, or our children, I guess, who have visual impairment, they don't have, they can't really observe some of those gross motor movements like some of their peers who do not have visual impairment, to observe a movement, to copy that movement, and then to refine that movement. And so, in my experience, I've seen, many of our kids, if they don't get some of this early stuff early on, they could develop some interesting gait patterns, or, they don't move, they don't execute body movements as fluidly as some of the other kids who are, what do we even say, typically developing? I don't know.
Yeah,
so, just kind of whatever. I don't even know what we were going to call it.
Our kids, the kids with vision.
With vision, right?
Yes.
Developing how they are, right? So
yeah.
So they may shuffle longer than kids who are, who may not have visual impairment at that time. And so I think it's really important to get in there to help these kids learn to move on their own and explore, so they can get more practice, but then also, help them modeling some of those gross motor movements so they can have more fluid movement patterns.
Perfect.
But like I said, in the future, right, that can impact, like, how they are stepping off curbs and stuff to cross the street. So, being able to cross the street, or being able to develop endurance and stamina for physical activities. So, if our kids are unable to drive and they have to walk everywhere, being able to have that stamina, endurance to walk long distances to get where they're going to go is going to be really important. And then also having decreased opportunities to experience a variety of different environments, right? And so if you're not moving out on your own very much, and you don't have a lot of that motivation to go out and explore the world, that really decreases those opportunities.
That's right. So tell us about what kinds of activities you do with families, with infants and toddlers specifically.
All right. So I think when people, you're going to laugh when you hear this, but I think when a lot of people see me working with my families and the students I work with, especially like in the younger group, they think I'm playing with them all the time, right?
Oh, bummer.
Right? So I'm on the ground, we're playing games, we're rolling balls at each other, we're singing songs, we're playing on playgrounds, just all that stuff, but, kind of hidden in all those activities that we're doing. I work a lot with families on helping children develop body awareness. So if you're doing like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, they're learning, where their body parts are in relation to each other, what areas, of their body their body parts are in, how they move through space. So developing that sense of self to be able to get out and move around. I also work a lot on positional directional concepts, because when you're visually impaired, being able to, follow positional directional concepts can really help narrow in the area that you have to move on around, rather than just saying, hey, go over there, and you're like, over where, type of thing. And so I'm working on like basic prepositions like up and down, top and bottom, left and right, next to and stuff like that, just because eventually as our students get older, these things translate into direction taking, right? So they're trying to get somewhere, give me some good directions on how to get to where I need to go. And so learning a lot of that stuff. We work a lot on safety, and so making sure that as kids are branching out and moving out in their environment, that they can do so confidently and safely. So last thing we want to have are kids falling down stairs or missing curbs and stuff like that. So and then eventually it's like driveway safety, so that and street safety, so kids can understand where cars are moving and stuff like that as they get a little bit older, and if they're out on outings with their families. And so working on a lot of that stuff. I also work with families on creating defined play areas for their children, because if children are like, how I was telling you about, things are kind of scary out there if you don't know what they are. The world is vast, and so we can start with something small, like a blanket on the ground or something that children can sit on and feel comfortable finding the edges. They can explore things, and as they get more comfortable moving in that smaller space, or even cribs or pack and plays, that they can just have a little space that they can move around and be comfortable in. And then as they do that, we just make it a little bit bigger, right? So the little blanket becomes a bigger blanket, and maybe we'll put it against the wall or something, and they can feel the wall. So just creating a lot of defined play spaces or movement spaces that promote safe and secure travel, yet provide children also with natural opportunities to problem solve, right? And so those are some of the things that
great.
What else do I do? So just giving them a lot
that's a lot, right?
Right.
So how about if we move, like, as they get older, how does O&M benefit young children as they transition to preschool and kindergarten?
So I think as O&M, if they can get O&M training when they're young, right? Because I think a lot of my O&M referrals are a lot of safety things, right? So kids are missing drop-offs, or they see contrast changes. So from a light to a dark service, kids get down and they feel it because they're not sure if it's a step or something. So working on some of those things. So if we work on identifying some of those concerns that we have in early intervention or at younger ages, and build that confidence to be able to move through those areas, that when they transition to preschool or kindergarten, that they do have that confidence to be able to move through a new environment. Because kids, for us as parents, that transition can be like from home to school is a big transition. It can be really scary, not only for parents but for the kids as well, right? So if they have the confidence to be able to move in an environment that is not quite as familiar as their home, is a really big things for kids. And so just looking at that confidence for transitioning from home to the school environment. They also have foundation for building more formal O&M skills on, if we build the foundation. So if they already know their positional directional words when they're younger, when they have body awareness, then we can move on to bigger things, right? So just being able to move around, if they're going to learn how to use a white cane, so they can do white cane skills. The big thing is moving around on the playground, and so if they can be safe on the playground with their, having confidence in themselves to be able to do that, but then also being able to tell teachers or whoever, adults who are monitoring, say, hey, I don't feel safe around here. Can we do some, maybe some pre-orientation so that they know where the drop-offs and stuff are. So it's just some of that stuff. Great. And then also the social piece, right? And so if students feel comfortable moving around in their environment, then they can move around with their peers, and that increases opportunities for social interactions with their new friends.
Absolutely.
In preschool and kindergarten.
Yeah, that sounds great. So working in early intervention is different than providing services to school-age children. What have you learned that you didn't know when you started?
I have learned so much, actually. So much. And I have my colleagues who are in early intervention to thank for educating me on it, because, when I was going through school to be an O&M specialist, we did not have a lot of content, I guess, or training in working with, birth to 3. We had some in preschool for sure, but not in birth to 3. And so when I came onto the scene and was trying to provide services for children in our birth to 3 program, I was all about direct service. We got to be in there working hands-on with kids, and then come and this is how we write goals, like an IEP or an individualized education plan. But then I started learning a lot of things about, early intervention works differently. And so I learned a lot about rather than doing like direct service with the actual child, it was more of a collaborative effort with parents. So even though I did work with families or my students' families and my older students, it's not quite, the same as, doing with families in early intervention. So I've had to learn how to do like coaching. So being able to, recognize families' priorities. We do like in O&M, we do like a sequential type of thing, right? So we learn certain skills and we go and we, build on our skills. But in early intervention, one of the big things I learned was family priorities. And so I may have had an agenda to do, a sequential thing, so sighted guide, and then we're going to learn protective techniques, and then we're going to move on to the cane. That wasn't quite it when I did early intervention. It was just like my kid or my baby is falling off a stair, right? Yeah. How can we do to fix this? Or what can we do to address this issue? So I learned a lot about, working with families, and finding out their concerns and priorities, which I think is great, because we want to make sure that we are addressing concerns and priorities of families first, and then working, other things in as we are doing that. The coaching piece, like I said, is another thing. So, at first I'm like, I have to be in their hands on and stuff like that. But then I learned that, to empower parents, to work with their children, we have to give them opportunity to do what we are asking or showing them to work with their children. Because I'm only there, maybe twice a month, or depending on the level of service, for an hour or so. But parents and family members are with their children all day long, right? Or not all day long, but for a lot of the time. Yeah. So we want to make sure that they have.
It just seems like it's all day long.
Do stuff after the visit, right? And so, or in between visits. So I learned a lot about that. I've also learned a lot about IFSPs. The way things are written, IFSPs are very different than IEPs. But yeah, but like I said, I've learned a lot, doing early intervention or working in early intervention, but those are some of the main things that I have come away with.
Great. All right. So do you have any words of wisdom to share with parents and early intervention providers about O&M?
Yes. So
awesome.
Well, one of my big things is like the early intervention vision specialists that I work with. We've been working on this our O&M collaboration in early intervention for about 10 or so years now, through training and observations of each other and learning about O&M. A lot of them knows, like, when in doubt, refer. So don't be afraid to refer or make a referral for O&M, an O&M evaluation, regardless of how old the child is. And I tell my providers, I'm like, I don't want you to wait until they're walking or being mobile or anything like that. If I can get in there earlier, then great for me. The worst thing I can say is like, oh, doing great, I'll see you in a few months or whatever. Right. So yeah, so don't be afraid to refer for an O&M evaluation, because I think the younger we can start means, for myself as a provider, when they're school age, is less work for me. So that's kind of selfish in that sense, but if we can get these things started with children when they're younger, but then also getting to know families so that they know what O&M is all about,
exactly,
is a good thing, because we're here on your team and we want to make sure that your children are able to travel as safely and as independently as possible in whatever environment they're in, right? So that's one of the other things. Another thing that I usually try to tell my parents is, if you have a young child, regardless of how much vision they have, you can always help them learn about their environment by just talking with them all the time. You may feel kind of strange, just talking to a baby, and it's just like I'm just talking to myself. But anything that you can narrate to them, throughout the day, and introduce things. It's like, hey, like for instance, if you're carrying your baby in the kitchen and you hear, It's like, hey, we're walking into the kitchen and, oh, do you hear that buzzing sound? I think that is the refrigerator. And then bring them over and maybe help them, explore the refrigerator a little bit, just to get some of those concepts down so they know what's in the areas that they are in, right?
Right.
And
So like those environmental sound cues,
yes,
kinds
exactly,
of things.
right? And then
Got
exploring things in the environment. So if you're going out for a family walk, don't forget to tell your children, like, oh, we're walking down the sidewalk, and can you hear the birds singing, or hear the leaves rustling, just so that they can just build some of those concepts. Who knows how much they're picking up, but everything that you can give them would be a good thing. And like I said, just making sure that they have a lot of opportunities for exploration. And then for myself, O&M, before kids are ambulating or being able to move on their own, so either it be the rolling or scooting or walking or anything like that, that for me it's a myth that you have to be doing one of those things before you can get O&M services. And then also, you don't have to be walking to be able to use a white cane either, because we can do a lot of different things with children to help develop their O&M skills before they're even walking or even rolling or anything like that. And
so what about children who are in wheelchairs? They can use white canes too?
Yes, absolutely. So
awesome.
I have students, and you don't even have to be in a wheelchair at that time. I have little ones
or a stroller.
Strollers who are using white canes.
Nice.
Right? Because the white cane is just another tool for our students to learn how to use to gather information about their environment.
Okay.
And so I have had students who, even though if they can't even grip onto a cane either, you can kind of rig it so the handle of the cane, or the grip of the cane or handle of the cane, is kind of up against their body. So when they're moving, they can feel the sidewalk or whatever surface they're traveling on in a stroller or in a wheelchair. And I've had older students who I have worked in the past who use wheelchairs, but they were able to use a white cane. I've used white canes with students in gait trainers and walkers. A lot of different things that we can do, right? So don't feel like a white cane is only reserved for people who can walk and have to be older, right? So we can do a lot of skill building and stuff like that when kids are young.
Got it. All right, we're almost at the end here. So is there anything else you would like to tell us before our time is finished? Or did we cover it all?
I don't have anything to say, but I'd be happy to come back and answer questions if you have more questions.
We would love that. So remember, those who are listening to the podcast, that we would love for you to give us input in the episode notes. You can go and there's a link to give us feedback for this and every episode, and let us know what you would like to learn more about. So thank you so much, Nana, for your time and all that you do. We appreciate the time that you spent with us, giving new parents some insight into what it will be like as they learn about early orientation and mobility skills.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So what did you think, ladies? What do you want to talk about orientation and mobility today?
Well, I love how she talks about bringing it in when you're young, and how you talked before the episode about how you didn't think that was needed. And a lot of people, when I questioned orientation and mobility when Hannah was probably about 2, was when I started questioning it. And several different people, including like doctors and people involved in early intervention, told me that they didn't think I should ask about orientation mobility or push to have her evaluated because she was so young, that she didn't need it. And they felt like her functional vision was good enough that she would only need it in some scenarios. So it would be something that she could quickly pick up on and just learn as needed. So I'm very type A, like to have everything planned out. And, I think in the future, we don't know what's going to happen with her vision. Like, it could get worse. I also would rather over learn something than have to hurry and learn it. So that was kind of my deciding factor on moving ahead and just pushing through myself with orientation mobility. And sure enough, they said, yes, she needs it. She still has orientation mobility today. She does have a cane. And, you know, those people were right. She doesn't need it all the time, but she does know how to use it. And it made me feel better as a parent, first of all, safety wise, because in crowds, if someone sees the white cane, they kind of move out of the way. And so not just safety for her, but safety for other people as well. Because if she doesn't see them coming from a certain angle, she could hurt someone. So that made me feel better, as well as the fact that introducing it younger made it normal for her. So she doesn't remember not having her cane. So it's not some weird thing that now she has to carry around. I mean, don't get me wrong, we still forget the cane all the time. Like, I'll have to turn around and go get the cane.
Well, she wouldn't be a kid if she didn't.
Yeah, it's like the thing that I like put in her backpack every day. The cane, like, you know, it's not so normal that we don't forget it, but it's not normal but it is normal to where she doesn't feel self-conscious about it. And she likes to talk about it. And if her friends ask her about it, she like really likes to teach you about the cane, the parts of her cane. So I know she would like to teach your all's kids too. So she has a little video in the show notes by the survey that shows the parts of her cane. So that was kind of my takeaway.
Fun.
One thing that I'm hearing also from you, Jenny, is that you had to decide what your priority was, and there were some folks maybe who were telling you a little bit differently, but you kind of took that advocate role, and that role often that moms take in telling others who are working with their child and their family what are important to them. And how did it feel for you to have to speak up and to talk about that in the conversation with others who recommended differently?
That was really hard for me, and it's something we experienced with Braille too. And I just, at first, you know, I really questioned myself. Like, I had this gut feeling that we just needed to move forward and do it. But I also knew that in this scenario, I was the least educated person on visual impairment that I was talking to, that I was just learning it because I had a child and she was little. I barely had any experience with her and her own visual impairment. So 100%, every single person I was talking to was more educated, and I should just, like the world tells me, I should just take them at their word and do what they say because they're the professionals here. But in the back of my mind, I kept going. And I would love to say that I immediately was like, no, she's having orientation mobility. No, I like thought about it for a while, and it was this internal struggle. And then I decided, you know what? This is my child. And at the end of the day, 10 years down the road, it doesn't matter what those people said. It matters what my child can do. So I just decided, I don't really care if they think that I'm ridiculous. I'm going to get her orientation mobility and we're going to move forward. And that was really hard for me because I do care what other people think. And as much as I don't want to, I do. And I do care about what other people think about my kids and my parenting. So it was like a big internal struggle.
I think one of my favorite things to say to families whenever they are working on their advocacy skills is to say, you are going to be your child's parent and your child's family member for the rest of their life. And the teacher is going to be the teacher for just a few years. And if you know in your heart that your child needs something, or maybe they don't need something that's recommended, then you need to trust your gut, and also trust that you are making decisions for the long term, and the teacher may not always have that long term mindset because, you know, they get to go home at the end of the day and they get to think about other things, but you're in your child's life for the rest of their life.
I think it's, and I think like coming back to Nana's interview is she talks about that's what she learned about early intervention is that it's about family priorities. And it's really important that we listen to those family priorities and guide the path forward in a way, manner of speaking, with what the family wants to do. So I love your story, Jenny. I think it's a positive, and look at the good results that you have. I certainly can say that as a TVI, I've had some I think the cane, especially, and orientation and mobility can be a very emotional experience for parents. So I hope, so I love how Nana says it's about making your child independent, and I always phrase it that way when I'm talking with parents or other people, because truly it is. It's not about labeling your child as visually impaired. It's about making them independent in all kinds of environments, which is certainly something that we want. I mean, I've had experiences where I've gone and done evaluations and recommended that a child have an orientation and mobility evaluation because they're falling or not safe in front of me, and I've had parents not want that report to be shared because they're just not ready yet. And certainly that is their right, but we're not trying to harm the child. We want the child to be independent and safe, and that's what this is all about. And it has other implications too, as Nana said. So motor development can be delayed or affected because of the visual impairment, and orientation and mobility helps with that. It's really important. I've done a lot of research with Nana and on this subject, and so I feel confident in saying that it is, how do you know if your child needs orientation and mobility if you don't evaluate them? It doesn't hurt to evaluate them. So you were right. You were right on, Jenny. It's like, maybe she doesn't need it, but how do we find out? By evaluating. So.
And if you're a listener who maybe is struggling with those feelings around your child possibly having a cane to use and a white cane, something that maybe you might be encouraged to do, or Cathy or Jenny, maybe you guys can speak to this as well from some of your experiences. One of the best things about early intervention is you have your provider there with you for a good amount of time, and many of us, and hopefully all of us, are trained in being responsive to families. So you can have a conversation and you can say, I'm just not ready yet. It's a me going on. It's our job to help you to work through some of those feelings about it. And when you're ready, doing one step at a time and getting there to give you the tools that you need and your child the tools that they need to access the environment and learn about the space around them.
Yeah, and I think that there's no shame at all in not being ready for it. Even though right now the cane doesn't bother me and it doesn't bother my daughter, I do in the back of my head worry about her in middle school. Like, what are people going to be mean to her because of the cane in middle school? So, like, I totally understand feeling apprehensive about it or nervous about it, but again, I do think that trying to normalize it and having it as part of the life as much as possible kind of eases that, because I tell myself, well, when she's in middle school, half the kids she's already gone to school with, so half of them have already seen her with the cane for the last 6 years.
Yeah, it's a typical thing. And that's one of the things that we want to change, right? We want people to feel more comfortable with everybody, with how everybody is independent and can access the world. So the more other kids see individuals with visual impairment using their canes in a safe and positive manner, the more the whole society will be more comfortable with it.
Thank you so much for listening to Feeling This Life. Please consider subscribing to Feeling This Life wherever you get your podcasts. And please take a minute or two to give us your feedback and your ideas for future episodes by completing our survey, which is linked in the show notes. There, you'll also find ways to get in contact with us, and you'll find resources related to today's episode. Please join us again next time for another episode of Feeling This Life.